What phrases should we say to this woman to tell her, I like you? If a woman feels attracted to you, she'll show it to you in some way. You should, if possible, have a clear idea of what you want. Do you know her well enough? But if I wait too long to ask her out, then maybe someone else who's interested in her might come along. What you are feeling is far more important than the other person's reaction. If I go and put myself out there while being consumed by neediness, to any healthy person I approach, obviously I'll come across as pitiful. When a man gets a no, he should ask himself a very constructive question and say, why did I approach someone who isn't aligned with me? So how do you tell a woman that you like her? How do you let her know you're interested in her? Obviously, there are 10 points. The first point is a bit unpleasant. It's that if you have to tell a woman that you like her, meaning if you find yourself in the position of having to go and say, I like you, she probably isn't very interested in you or not particularly interested. Why? Because if she were actually interested in you, like most women do when they're truly interested, unless they have particular issues with shyness, which can also happen. But if a woman feels attracted, she shows it to you in some way. Okay? She tells you, she shows you, she does something. So you don't need to go and tell her that you like her. You can simply invite her out. Okay? But if you have to go to a woman and tell her, I like you, it means you're not sure that she has understood that you're interested. Let's start from there, okay? So it means she hasn't given you any clear signals. So if you have to confess your feelings, there's already, I'm not saying it's a problem, but it means that either you haven't picked up on the signals or she simply hasn't given them to you because either she doesn't share your interest or she does, but it's not clear. Maybe because she's a reserved and introverted person and so on. So let's start from the assumption that there's already a bit of uncertainty when we go to confess our feelings because the other person might, with a fairly high probability, if they haven't given clear signals, but I repeat, if they do give clear signals, then this whole thing happens naturally. But if you have to create it, the meaning is that if you have to create it, it probably means it doesn't exist. The second point we need to keep in mind is that before confessing our feelings, or in your case, before declaring yourself to the lady, you should, if possible, have a clear idea. What does that mean? It means you should know what kind of interest you have in this person. Is it a sexual, physical, or aesthetic interest? Is it a deep interest? Are you in love with her as a person? Do you know her well enough to know what you want? Because maybe she's someone you see every day, you talk to her, maybe at work, you spend time together in certain settings, or maybe she's someone you don't really know, because this is important too, okay? So you need to be clear about what you want to understand whether it's just a superficial attraction or a deeper interest, and also to figure out if you yourself are at a point where you're looking for something serious regardless of her, or if you're at the point where you're looking for something more casual. And point number 3 is that if you don't want anything serious, you need to say so upfront. I mean, in a situation where you're about to get to know a woman, obviously you might say, but Daniela, I don't know if I want something serious with this person. I don't know her well. Maybe yes, maybe no, who knows? Actually, that's not exactly true, because anyone who is able to listen to themselves, to understand themselves, to ask themselves the right questions, is someone who is capable of understanding what they want, both in general and from the person they've just met. Why? Because our feelings, if we are in touch, in contact with our deeper feelings, they tell us whether we actually like this person or if it's more like, yeah, okay. But in reality, I only want them because right now I don't have anyone else. I haven't found anything better. I need someone. And so I'm interested for that reason. And that's where the problem comes in. The problem is that so many people start relationships when in reality they only intended to have some fun, and they find themselves already in a relationship because maybe the woman has set up all the foundations for it while they weren't really interested. They just wanted to pass the time, have some fun, and so on. Or they are falling in love, in heavy quotation marks, just because they have a need. Okay? So, if you don't want anything serious, first of all, you should do some soul searching to understand whether, regardless of the woman, you are in a phase where you want a relationship or just want to have fun. This basically, right, is something a person should know or feel. And then when you meet this person, you should assess how you perceive them. Whether the interest you feel is more superficial, driven by a need, whether sexual or emotional, or if it's a deeper interest. And clearly, the idea is that after the age of 25 or 30, it's quite likely that a single woman, unless she already has one or two failed marriages behind her or has just come out of a bad relationship and so on, which might make her a bit wary, right? But generally speaking, it's not very common for a woman to simply be looking for a one night stand just for fun, at least not in most situations. I mean, of course, there are some who do, but it's almost never the case that that's what she's looking for, especially if she's seeing a man. So the main point here is if you just want to have a good time and enjoy a pleasant, relaxing evening together, it would really be best to make that clear to the other person so that she can calmly and freely decide for herself whether she's interested in having some fun and a light-hearted fling with you or not. Okay? On the other hand, deceiving someone, making it seem like you're interested or not saying anything, even though you already know you don't want anything more with this person, from my point of view, that's not right. Okay? And you might say, yeah, but if I do that, I'll lose her, right? Maybe I should just play along. Yes, but you're also doing something on a human and ethical level that, in my view, is healthy. Point number 4 is that it would be wise to follow a certain timing, not so much the timing as some people think. Oh, if I tell her too soon, then she won't be interested. If I tell her too late, then she'll have already run off with someone else. Some people believe this, but it's not true. The person who doesn't want you if you tell them too soon, or who's already run off with someone else if you tell them too late, is someone who only had a mild interest in you, okay? Yes, it's true. Someone might also say, but maybe they don't know me well enough yet. So, since they don't know me that well, it's possible that their interest still needs to develop. Yes, that's possible. But generally speaking, women are quite perceptive. So, usually, before the man does, she's already figured out whether she's interested or not. So if she's truly interested, even if you wait to tell her, it's not a problem. If she's not interested, whether you tell her early or late, she still won't be interested. So the issue of timing isn't really about whether you tell her sooner or later, or worrying that she'll slip away if you wait, or that she'll get scared if you say it too soon. It's about communicating your interest to someone at the moment when that interest is genuinely real, when you're clear about what you're doing, who this person is, and whether you've gotten to know her well enough. If you haven't gotten to know her well enough, you can express your interest in another way. Instead of saying, I like you, I'm in love with you, and so on, you could simply say, I'm intrigued by you. I'd like to get to know you better. And this is an extremely honest statement, meaning you're telling someone the idea is, I don't know if I like you yet, but I am curious about you. As a person, you inspire me. You seem like someone I might like or would enjoy getting to know. Then, of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that a relationship will develop from there, but maybe she could become a friend. Maybe she'll be someone with whom there's absolutely nothing, or maybe even a wonderful relationship could blossom. So if you don't have, this is why I talk about timing, meaning that if you don't have the tools, the information, or you don't know how to listen to yourself to understand whether this is really someone who could be right for you, you shouldn't go and declare yourself by saying, I like you, I'm interested in you, I've fallen in love with you, I'm emotionally involved with you. You might say, but who actually does that? A lot of people do it, actually. There are men and women too, but even men who go and declare themselves like that. So it's useful to explain and specify that timing in the sense of wait until you understand whether that person is really someone you want something with, or if you're unsure, take the time you need to figure it out. Obviously, someone might say, but if I wait for too long to actually ask her out, maybe, just maybe, there could be someone else out there who's also interested in her. Or someone might say, if I show only a lukewarm interest, if my interest just seems kind of casual or not very strong, won't she maybe think I'm not really serious, not truly interested in her, and so on? The answer is it could be, but from my point of view, which is of course open to debate, from my point of view, a serious person understands what you're doing, understands that you're taking things slowly, that you're not in a rush, that you're not living in fear of losing her. And a healthy person, a healthy woman will appreciate you for this. If it's a woman who says, no, you have to be sure, I want everything right away. If you're not sure, then screw you. I'll find someone else who is. That's probably a woman who's going to crash and burn badly with the guy who's supposedly sure. Also, because most relationships that start off at full speed with guys who are all sure of themselves, all in love, and so on, usually don't end up all that well, precisely because the commitment is made prematurely before there's been enough time to really get to know each other. The fifth point is not to be afraid to openly and honestly express what you truly feel, because feelings, our feelings, when we are able to perceive and recognize them, do indeed have value, real, genuine value. My advice is to be absolutely certain yourselves that when you are expressing what you truly feel for someone, you very clearly need to express it in the right way. You must not, under any circumstances, force the other person's hand, nor manipulate them, nor make them feel overwhelmed or pressured in any way. But if you simply express your feelings to someone, which can range from, I'd like to get to know you better because you seem like an interesting person, all the way to, I'm completely in love and infatuated with you. So between these two extremes, what you're doing is something beautiful, not something bad. So try to really, truly focus on this. And whatever reaction the other person may have, instead of blaming them because maybe they're not behaving properly, you stay true, faithful to what you're actually feeling inside your heart, because what you're feeling deep down is far more important than the other person's reaction. And that's perfectly okay. All right. But how do I say this though? How should I go about saying it? I say it. How do I say it to her? Are there certain phrases we need to say? A lot of men ask me, but what phrases should we say to this woman to tell her I like you? What is the best word to choose? The point here, guys, is that things need to be said clearly without beating around the bush too much, because the way that is the form you use, okay, is completely irrelevant, obviously excluding the extremes. I mean, if you go up to a woman and insult her by saying something rude or unpleasant, or you make an inappropriate or crude remark to tell her you like her, she might react badly. But within the realm of normal things to say, like, I'm interested in you, I saw you, and you seemed like a nice person. I'd like to get to know you. Or, look, I've developed a crush on you. I like you as a person, and I want to go out with you. All these kinds of things don't make any difference at all. The way you say it doesn't matter, because what matters is the content. If the other person receives a normal message, obviously expressed in a respectful way, right? I mean, let's avoid over the top things. But if the way you say it is respectful, it's the content that matters to the other person. And since women are generally quite perceptive and highly intuitive by nature, she more or less already knows deep down whether she's interested in you or not. So the way you say it and the specific words you choose really don't make much of a difference. The message is, I'm interested in you, I want to go out with you. That's what needs to come across. What you say doesn't matter. So once the woman understands the message, she decides, am I interested in this guy or not? She decides because you are the one making your intentions clear, okay? It's not because, as some people say, it's always the woman who decides, blah, blah, blah. By the way, I made a video about this topic that's here on the YouTube channel. It's always women who decide. It's not that women always decide, it's the woman who decides. If you are the one approaching her, obviously, as is normally the case, right? If I go to a job interview, it's the employer who decides, not me, obviously. If I'm offered a job, then I'm the one who decides. Okay, so say it clearly without beating around the bush. What matters is the content, not the form. Then, of course, she will make her decision, which she has probably already made beforehand. Clearly, she may have already had the chance to get to know you if you're someone she's already talked to or interacted with in shared settings, and so she can give a more informed answer. If, on the other hand, she's someone you've hardly ever seen or practically never seen, try to propose it in a light way, like saying, as I mentioned before, if she seems interesting to me, we can exchange numbers, maybe go for a coffee together, and so on. The seventh point is don't tie your self-worth to the answer, okay? Because whether or not the other person reciprocates your interest does not define your value. And this might sound like an obvious statement, and I really hope it is obvious. But in reality, it's not that obvious, because there are so many people who already struggle to feel good enough, to feel adequate, to feel worthy. And unfortunately, they take rejection as something unpleasant, as something that defines their value. I was rejected, so that means I'm not valuable. In reality, it's not really like that, because in relationships, people aren't just looking at your value. They're looking at how you might actually fit together with that person. So you do have value, not in an objective way. Of course, there are some more or less objective criteria that can be developed, but value isn't as objective as people think. It depends on the compatibility you can have with someone. Obviously, the more appealing qualities you have, the easier it is for these connections to happen, of course. But in and of itself, don't take. The point is, any possible rejection, which is highly likely when you approach someone, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, don't take that rejection as a definition of your value as a person, as a lover, or anything like that. Because rejection could be due to 1,001 reasons. Maybe that person is already in love with someone else, or maybe they simply have completely different standards from yours, but that doesn't mean that yours aren't good enough. Let's say, for example, someone says, I want a tall person, I don't know, someone who's 6'3" and up, or at least 5'11", and you're 5'9". Does that mean you're worth less? Or 5'5"? You're not worth less. For that person, yes, but not in general. Okay? I used the example of height because it really hits a nerve for a lot of people, right? So it's a matter of compatibility, not really of value. And actually, greater compatibility is often based on projections, on unconscious issues that most people aren't even aware of. Okay? So don't worry, because you can still definitely click with other people, even if that person said no to you. In fact, I think that when a man or a woman gets rejected, they should ask themselves a very constructive question. Why did I approach someone who isn't aligned with me? What did I fail to see? This is an extremely intelligent question. Why did I become infatuated with and fall in love with someone who isn't aligned with me and with who I am? Point number 8, you shouldn't try to change her mind or convince her, because unfortunately, some people do this. When they find themselves in a situation where the other person has said no, they become stubborn. Some people even come to me and say, Daniela, can you help me try to convince that person to be with me, to go out with me, to stay with me? And sometimes they put themselves in situations where they insist. Okay? Someone might even say, Daniela, but look, so many men have married women whom they pursued persistently. They wore them down. So I have to tell you something unpleasant, guys, quite unpleasant. And unfortunately, that's always the case. I feel like saying always, let's put it this way, I've never heard of an exception to what I'm about to tell you now. Any person, man or woman, it's more likely to be a woman because it's usually men who insist, who try to win someone over. But sometimes women do it too. Because I've had male friends who were really pestered by women, and in the end, they gave in. Well, honestly, I don't personally know a single person who has ever had a truly lasting and genuinely healthy relationship that actually started from persistence, not even one. Because if person A, whether man or woman, isn't convinced, and you, person B, keep insisting, and eventually they give in. Why do they give in? Not because they're in love with you or emotionally involved with you. And you might say, but yes, maybe in the meantime, they'll get to know me. No, in the meantime, either they just get used to you, or they haven't found anyone better, or they have big needs to fill and you're the one who fills them best, but that's not love. So simply avoid insisting if, after you've confessed your feelings, the answer is, I'm not interested. It's not the right time. I have other things on my mind. There are men who, if the woman says no, but now is not the right time, I'm not sure, I don't know if I like you, I don't know if I'm interested, they keep hanging around trying to find a weak spot and strike at another time. So it's a bit like insisting, like trying to convince her, right? Actually, the same thing I mentioned earlier applies here as well. That is, a person who gives in at a certain point is someone who wasn't convinced and eventually gives in. Maybe she even falls in love, gets involved. but it's not really the kind of love that is born from a deep connection. It's a love based on an interest. Most of the time, women give in because they realize that man is there and present, not because they're in love, but because he's there and present. Unfortunately, women place a lot of value on the fact that a man is there, is present, is supportive. And this can even lead them to fall in love, but it's not real love. It's a love conditioned by need, okay? Point number 9. If it works out, great. But if it doesn't, once you've confessed your feelings, try to learn from the experience and move on. What I mean is that every time you confess your feelings to someone, right? I like you, I'm interested in you, or even just, you intrigue me. Do you want to go out with me? It can be an opportunity for growth because we can observe ourselves as we act. We can listen to whether we have fears while we're doing it. So we can sense if we feel valuable, if we have self-esteem, and notice whether we're presenting ourselves authentically or if we're approaching the other person out of some kind of neediness. If I approach someone and I'm consumed by neediness, then to any healthy person I approach, obviously I'll come across as pitiable. I won't be interesting, right? Of course, another needy person to whom I might declare myself won't notice that I'm consumed by neediness. And what develops is a very unhealthy codependent relationship. So try to use the experience of putting yourself out there, regardless of whether it goes well or not, as an opportunity to get feedback, okay? An opportunity to try to understand who you are, what you feel, what you are doing, why you are doing it, and how you feel if you get a no. This is truly a moment when you can gather a lot of information about yourself so you can learn who you are, how you are, and what you feel. And finally, 10, the last point is that my advice, this is something I give to everyone, even my clients, is that if you have even a little bit of familiarity with this person, even just a little, meaning at least you have their phone number, so you've at least gotten to the point of exchanging numbers, or maybe your people who frequent the same places, etc. My advice, if you receive a no after putting yourself out there, is to ask this person for feedback. And you might say, no, Daniela, are you crazy? Then maybe she'll think that I'm a loser, a failure. But why the heck do you care? What do you think? She's already said no to you. At least make use of the information. Get some data for yourself. The data is, let's see what this person says about me, how I come across from the outside. As long as it's someone who's actually able to give you feedback, because not everyone is capable of that. Most women, either because they don't feel like it or because they're not able to, will just tell you, no, it's simply that the spark wasn't there, which is obviously nonsense because the fact that the spark didn't happen always has a reason. It's just that they don't know the reason themselves or they don't feel like wasting time telling you. But if you come across a woman who's a bit more savvy or a bit more honest and who's willing to spend a couple of seconds giving you feedback, it can be really useful for you. Because if you're not able, as I explained in point 9, to do a self-check, at the very least, you can see how you come across to others. Obviously, it will be the opinion of just one person, and that's fair. But maybe if you get some feedback here and there, you can start to gather it and better understand how you come across to other people on the outside.